The rain battered the windows of my tiny Brooklyn apartment, a relentless drumbeat that matched the pounding in my chest. I stared at the eviction notice, the ink smudged from my sweaty palms, and felt the weight of $50. 000 in medical debt crushing me. At 24, I was drowning, and no one was throwing me a lifeline until he walked in. My name is Ethan Carter, a barista with dreams bigger than my bank account. And that night, I was one bad decision away from losing everything. The hospital bills from Mom's cancer treatment had piled up, and the landlord wasn't known for his patience. I'd already sold my guitar, my only escape, but it wasn't enough. Then came the knock at my door, sharp and deliberate, like fate had finally decided to show up. Standing there was Julian West, the heir to West Enterprises, a name that screamed old money and untouchable power. I'd seen him before, sipping overpriced coffee at the shop where I worked, his tailored suits a stark contrast to my stained apron. He was 26, all sharp jawlines and cold blue eyes that seemed to see through you. "I hear you're in trouble, Ethan," he said, his voice smooth as whiskey, "and I'm here to offer you a way out." I should have slammed the door. Guys like Julian didn't just help people like me. But desperation makes you stupid. And I let him in. He sat on my threadbare couch, looking absurdly out of place, and laid out his deal. He'd pay off my debt, every cent, if I agreed to be his companion for 6 months. Not a word about what companion meant, but the way his gaze lingered on me sent a shiver down my spine. "No strings attached," he said, but his smile told me strings were the whole point. "What's in it for you?" I asked, my voice hoarse. Julian leaned closer, his cologne sharp and expensive. "Let's just say I like a challenge." His words hung in the air, dangerous and magnetic, and I hated how they made my pulse race. I was straighter at least. I'd always told myself I was. But Julian's presence, all confidence and quiet intensity, stirred something I couldn't name. I signed the contract that night, my hand shaking as I scrawled my name. Felt like selling my soul. But what choice did I have? The money hit my account the next morning. And just like that, my debt was gone. So was my freedom. Julian didn't waste time. By noon, I was in his penthouse, a glass-walled palace overlooking Manhattan, feeling like a stray dog in a cathedral. The first week was a blur of opulence and unease. Julian was charming, infuriatingly so, with a wit that cut like a knife. He took me to galas, introduced me as his friend to people who didn't care to ask questions. I played along, wearing the clothes he bought, eating food I couldn't pronounce. But every night, when the city lights glittered below, I felt his eyes on me, searching for something I wasn't ready to give. It wasn't just the deal that unnerved me. It was him. Julian was a paradox, generous one moment, cold the next. He'd ask about my life, my mom, my dreams of being a musician, and listen like he cared. Then he'd shut down, his walls higher than the skyscrapers around us. I told myself it was just business, that I could keep my heart out of it. But late at night, when he'd sit too close, his hand brushing mine, I wasn't so sure. One evening, at a rooftop party filled with people who'd never known hunger, Julian pulled me aside. The city sprawled beneath us, a sea of lights and secrets. "You're doing well, Ethan," he said, his voice softer than usual. "But you're holding back. I laughed. Bitter. You bought my time, not my soul. His eyes darkened, and for a moment, I thought he'd kiss me. Instead, he turned away, leaving me with a racing heart and a question I was too scared to answer. The deal was supposed to be simple, 6 months. No complications. But nothing about Julian West was simple. He was a storm, and I was already caught in it. As the days turned into weeks, I realized the real cost of our agreement wasn't the debt I'd paid, it was the pieces of myself I was losing to him. And the worst part, I wasn't sure I wanted to stop. The days bled into each other, each one a tightrope walk between survival and surrender. Julian's world was a maze of crystal chandeliers and whispered deals, and I was learning its rules the hard way. Every smile I faked, every hand I shook, felt like a betrayal of the kid from Brooklyn who just wanted to play his guitar. Julian was relentless. He dragged me to art galleries, charity balls, places where the air smelled like money and ambition. I was his shadow, always a step behind, wearing suits that cost more than my rent. People stared, their eyes dissecting me, wondering what a guy like me was doing with a guy like him. I wondered too. The contract said companion, but the way Julian's hand lingered on my shoulder, the way his voice dropped when he said my name, made it feel like something else. One night, at a fundraiser in a glittering midtown hotel, I hit my limit. The room was packed with elites sipping champagne, their laughter grating against my nerves. Julian was in his element, charming a senator's wife with that effortless smile. I stood by the bar, nursing a soda, feeling like a prop. A woman in a sequined dress sidled up, her perfume overwhelming. "You're Julian's new toy, aren't you?" she purred, her words dripping with condescension. I gripped my glass so hard it nearly cracked. When Julian found me later, I was outside, the cold November air biting my face. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice low. I snapped. "I'm not your damn accessory, Julian. I'm here because I had no choice, not because I want to be." His jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. Instead, he stepped closer, his breath visible in the chill. "You think I don't see you, Ethan?" "I do. More than you know." His words hit like a punch, and I hated how they made my chest ache. Back at his penthouse, the silence between us was heavy. He poured himself a drink, the ice clinking in the glass. "Why do you fight it?" he asked, not looking at me. "Fight what?" I shot back, though I knew exactly what he meant. The pull between us, the way my skin burned when he was near. I wasn't ready to admit it, not to him, not to myself. "You're not as straight as you think," he said, his voice soft but sharp. I stormed out, my heart pounding, because deep down, I knew he was right. The next morning, Julian acted like nothing had happened. He handed me a coffee, his fingers brushing mine, and went back to his emails. But something had shifted. I started noticing things, the way his laugh softened when we were alone, the way he'd hum under his breath when he thought I wasn't listening. He wasn't just the untouchable heir anymore. He was human, flawed, and maybe as lost as I was. One evening, he took me to a jazz club in Harlem, a place so different from his usual haunts it threw me off. The music was raw, soulful, and for the first time, I felt like myself again. Julian watched me, not the band, his eyes tracing my face. "You love this, don't you?" he said. I nodded, unable to speak. He leaned in, his voice barely a whisper. "I want to know you, Ethan. The real you." My throat tightened. No one had ever asked that before. That night, back at the penthouse, couldn't sleep. I sat on the balcony, the city humming below, and thought about the kid who used to dream of stages and spotlights. Julian joined me, silent, his presence a quiet anchor. "Why me?" I asked finally. "Why pick me for this deal?" He looked at me, his eyes unguarded for once. "Because you're real," he said. "And I'm tired of everything else." His words broke something in me. I wanted to hate him, to keep my walls up, but they were crumbling. The deal was supposed to be about money, about survival. But as Julian's hand found mine in the dark, I realized it was becoming something more, something I wasn't sure I could survive. The line between obligation and desire blurred faster than I could keep up. Julian's touch, once a fleeting accident, became deliberately a hand on my back during a crowded event. A glance that lingered too long. Each moment chipped away at my resolve, and I hated how much I craved it. By the second month, I was living in his penthouse full-time. My Brooklyn apartment was a memory, sublet to some stranger. Julian insisted it was practical. But I saw the truth in his eyes. He wanted me close. The penthouse was a fortress of glass and steel, but it felt like a cage. Every luxury, the marble counters, the skyline view reminded me I didn't belong. Yet, when Julian smiled, soft and unguarded, I wondered if I could. One night, he came home late, his tie loose, his hair mussed. "Rough day?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He laughed. "Bitter. Family drama. My father thinks I'm wasting my life." He didn't elaborate, but I saw the weight he carried. The heir expected to be perfect. For the first time, I wanted to reach out, to ease his pain. Instead, I poured him a drink and sat across from him, the silence heavy with things unsaid. The next day, Julian took me to Central Park, a rare break from his world of power plays. We walked through the snow-dusted paths, our breaths visible in the crisp air. He stopped by a frozen pond, his eyes distant. "I used to come here as a kid," he said. "It was the only place I felt free." I wanted to ask more, to peel back the layers of Julian West. But he changed the subject, pointing out a street musician. "Play something," he said, tossing a bill into the guy's case. I froze. I hadn't touched a guitar since I sold mine. Julian saw my hesitation and handed me his phone, already open to a music app. "Sing," he said, half challenge, half plea. My voice cracked at first, raw from disuse. But as I sang a quiet ballad, the park faded away. When I finished, Julian was staring, his eyes soft. "You're incredible," he said, and the sincerity in his voice made my chest ache. For a moment, it wasn't about the deal. It was just us. But reality always crept back. At a corporate dinner that weekend, Julian's father, Richard West, cornered me. He was a taller, colder version of Julian, his eyes like steel. "You're a distraction," he said, his voice low. "Julian has responsibilities. Don't get comfortable." The words stung. But worse was the doubt they planted. Was I just a game to Julian? A rebellion against his father's control? I confronted Julian that night, my anger spilling over. Am I just your way of pissing off your dad? I demanded. He flinched, but his voice was steady. You think this is a game, Ethan? He stopped, running a hand through his hair. I don't know how to do this. But you're not a game. His vulnerability disarmed me. And before I could stop myself, I kissed him. It was reckless, desperate, a collision of everything I'd been fighting. His lips were warm, urgent, and for a moment, the world made sense. But when we pulled apart, panic hit. This wasn't part of the deal. I whispered. Julian's eyes searched mine. Maybe it should be, he said, his voice raw. I turned away, my heart racing, because I knew I was falling, and falling for Julian West was a dangerous thing. The next morning, I woke to an email from the hospital. My mom's condition had worsened. The debt was gone, but the fear wasn't. I needed to see her, but Julian had a gala planned, one he insisted I attend. Torn between duty and desire, I chose the hospital. When I told Julian, his face hardened. You're breaking the contract, he said, but his voice cracked. I left anyway, the distance between us growing with every step. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and regret. Mom looked smaller in the bed, her smile weak but real. I held her hand, telling her about the coffee shop, leaving out Julian and the deal. She didn't need to know I'd traded my freedom for her bills. But as I sat there, guilt gnawed at me, not just for Mom, but for leaving Julian without explanation. When I returned to the penthouse, Julian was waiting, his face a mask of controlled anger. You left, he said, his voice tight. I had to. I shot back. She's my mom. He paced, his hands clenched. You could have told me. I would have. He stopped, as if the words were too much. I wanted to reach for him, to bridge the gap, but the contract loomed between us, a reminder of why we were here. The next week was tense. Julian was distant, burying himself in work, while I played the role of the perfect companion at his side. But the kiss lingered, a ghost neither of us acknowledged. I caught myself watching him, his quick smiles, the way his fingers tapped when he was nervous. I was falling deeper, and it terrified me. One night, Julian took me to a quiet diner, a place so normal it felt surreal. Over greasy burgers, he opened up about his father, the pressure to take over West Enterprises, the expectations that suffocated him. I'm not like him, he said, his voice fierce. I don't want to be. I reached for his hand, and he didn't pull away. For the first time, I saw the real Julian, not the heir, but the man who wanted to be free. Our connection grew in stolen moments, a late-night talk on the balcony, a shared laugh over a bad movie. But the closer we got, the more I feared the end. The contract had 4 months left, and I didn't know what happened when it was over. Would Julian walk away? Would I? The answer came at a charity auction, where Julian's world collided with mine. A bidder, an older man with a cruel smile, made a comment about me being Julian's pet. The room laughed, but Julian's face turned to stone. He grabbed my arm, pulling me outside. I'm sorry, he said, his voice shaking. You don't deserve this. I wanted to tell him it was okay, that I could handle it. But the truth was, couldn't. Not anymore. That night, we crossed a line. In the dim light of his bedroom, with the city silent below, we gave in. It wasn't just physical, it was raw, vulnerable, a confession neither of us could voice. Afterward, lying in his arms, I felt whole for the first time in years. But as dawn broke, reality crept in. The contract, his father, my mom. This wasn't a love story, it was a deal. And deals end. The next morning, Julian was gone before I woke. A note on the counter read, "Need to clear my head. Stay." I didn't. I went back to Brooklyn, to the life I'd left behind, trying to remember who I was before Julian West. But every step felt wrong, like I was leaving a piece of myself behind. I didn't know it then, but the worst was yet to come. Brooklyn felt like a stranger. The familiar streets, the cracked sidewalks, the hum of my old neighborhood. It should have been home. But it wasn't. Julian had changed me, and I hated him for it. I spent the day at the coffee shop, picking up a shift, trying to drown out the ache in my chest. But every customer's laugh, every clink of a mug, reminded me of him. When I returned to the penthouse, Julian was there, his face pale. "You left," he said, echoing his words from before. But this time, there was no anger, just hurt. I wanted to explain, to tell him I was scared, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I asked, "What are we doing?" "Julian, this isn't just a deal anymore." He looked away, his jaw tight. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I don't want to lose you." His honesty shattered me. I stepped closer, and he pulled me into his arms, his touch desperate. We didn't speak, but our bodies said everything: fear, longing, hope. For the first time, I let myself believe we could be more than a contract. But hope is a dangerous thing. The next day, Julian's father summoned us to the West Enterprises Tower. Richard West sat behind a mahogany desk, his presence suffocating. "This ends now," he said, his eyes on me. "You're a liability, Ethan. Julian has a future, and it's not with you." He slid a check across the desk. $100,000. "Take it and walk away." I stared at the numbers, my stomach churning. It was enough to start over, to give Mom a better life. But it meant losing Julian. I looked at Julian, waiting for him to say something. Anything. He didn't. His silence cut deeper than his father's words. I left the check on the desk and walked out, my heart in pieces. Julian followed, grabbing my arm in the hallway. "Ethan, wait," he pleaded. I didn't know he'd do that. But I was done. "You didn't stop him," I said, my voice breaking. "You let him treat me like nothing." I spent the next week in Brooklyn, ignoring Julian's calls. Mom was stable, but I wasn't. I kept replaying that night in his bedroom. The way he'd held me like I was his world. Was it real? Or was I just a fool? The contract was a chain, but Julian's silence was what broke me. Then, one night, he showed up at my door, soaked from the rain. "I'm done with him," he said, his voice raw. "My father, his empire, I am done." I wanted to believe him, But trust was a fragile thing. "What do you want, Julian?" I asked. He stepped closer, his eyes fierce. "You. Just you." We talked until dawn, laying bare our fears, our dreams. He told me about his mother, who left when he was a kid, about the pressure to be someone he wasn't. I told him about losing my dad, about the music I'd buried to survive. For the first time, we were equals, not debtor and heir. But the contract still loomed, a ticking clock neither of us could ignore. Julian's rebellion against his father changed everything. He started skipping board meetings, ignoring his father's calls. We spent days in the penthouse, not as heir and companion, but as two people trying to figure out what we were. We laughed, fought, made love, and for a moment, I believed we could rewrite the rules. But the world doesn't stop for love. Richard West wasn't a man who lost gracefully. One morning, a courier delivered a letter, the contract, with a new clause. If I didn't leave Julian by the end of the month, the debt would be reinstated, with interest. My stomach dropped. Julian saw my face and grabbed the letter, his hands shaking as he read. "He can't do this," he said. But we both knew he could. I wanted to fight, but fear crept in. Mom's health was fragile, and I couldn't risk her future. Julian saw my hesitation and pulled me close. "We'll figure it out," he promised. But his voice lacked the certainty I needed. That night, I lay awake, his arms around me, wondering if love was worth the cost. The next day, Julian took me to a recording studio, a surprise he'd planned weeks ago. "Make something real," he said, handing me a guitar. I played, pouring my heart into a song about loss and hope. Julian watched, his eyes shining, and when I finished, he kissed me like it was the first time. "You're my home," he whispered. I wanted to believe him, but the letter's deadline loomed. Richard made his next move at a family dinner, a lavish affair at their estate in the Hamptons. Julian insisted I come, a defiance against his father. The table was a battlefield, every word a weapon. Richard ignored me, speaking only to Julian about duty and legacy. Then he turned to me, his smile cold. "Ethan, how's your mother? I hear hospitals are expensive." The threat was clear, and Julian's hand tightened on mine under the table. After dinner, Julian confronted his father in private. I waited outside, my heart pounding. When Julian emerged, his face was pale, his eyes red. "He'll destroy you," he said, his voice hollow. "He'll take everything." I wanted to tell him I didn't care, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I kissed him, desperate to hold on to what we had. The next morning, I found a plane ticket on the counter to Seattle. One way. A note from Julian read, "I can't let him hurt you. Go." My heart shattered. He was letting me go, thinking it would save me, but it felt like betrayal. I packed my bag, my hands shaking, and left without saying goodbye. The contract was over, but so was everything else. Seattle was gray, a fitting backdrop for the hole in my chest. I moved in with an old friend, got a job at a coffee shop, tried to rebuild. But every note I played, every song I wrote, was for Julian. I hated him for letting me go, but I missed him more than I could bear. Mom's health improved, a small mercy in the chaos. I called her every day, avoiding the topic of Julian. But one night, she asked, "Who broke your heart?" "Ethan." I couldn't answer. Instead, I wrote a song, raw and aching, and posted it online. It went viral, a small spark of hope in the dark. Months passed, and I thought I was healing. Then I saw him, Julian, on a news segment, announcing his departure from West Enterprises. He looked tired, older, but his voice was steady. "I'm done living for someone else," he said. My heart raced. Was he talking about me? I didn't have to wonder long. A week later, he showed up at my coffee shop, his suit replaced by jeans and a hoodie. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "I thought letting you go was the right thing." I wanted to yell, to push him away, but all I could do was stare. He stepped closer, his eyes pleading. "I love you, Ethan. I should have fought for you." I didn't know if I could trust him, but I let him stay. We talked, laughed, cried, rebuilding what we'd lost. He told me about defying his father, about starting over with nothing but his own name. I told him about the song, about the pain he'd caused. It wasn't easy, but it was honest. One night, we went to a local open mic. I played my song, the one I'd written for him, and the crowd fell silent. Julian stood in the back, tears in his eyes. When I finished, he pulled me into his arms, not caring who saw. "I'm not going anywhere," he whispered. For the first time, I believed him. Seattle became our new beginning. Julian moved into my tiny apartment, trading penthouses for creaky floors and takeout dinners. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. We built a life, not on contracts or money, but on truth. My music took off, small gigs turning into bigger ones. And Julian was there, cheering louder than anyone. His father tried to pull him back, but Julian was done. He cut ties, choosing me over legacy. It wasn't easy. Richard's influence lingered, a shadow we couldn't fully escape. But together, we were stronger. Mom met Julian, and though she raised an eyebrow at his past, she saw how he looked at me. "He's a keeper," she said, and I laughed, because she was right. One night, under the Seattle stars, Julian proposed, not with a ring, but with a guitar pick engraved with our initials. "I don't have much," he said, his voice soft, "but I have you." I said yes, my heart full. The deal that started it all was a distant memory, replaced by something real. Years later, standing on a stage, my music filling the air, I looked out and saw Julian in the crowd. He wasn't the heir anymore, just the man who broke me and then helped me rebuild. Our story wasn't perfect, but it was ours, forged in pain, love, and the courage to choose each other. And that was worth more than any deal.